Good afternoon. Welcome to How to Write an Effective and Compliant IEP webinar series. My name is Lori Chesnut, and I am one of the program specialists in the Special Education Services Department. I will be conducting today's webinar on the topic of secondary transition planning. The agenda for today will include the importance of transition planning, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and Oklahoma State policy as it relates to transition, the Indicator 13 checklist, which goes over the required components of a secondary transition plan. I do want to let you know up front that this is going to be a lot of information presented in a short amount of time. As you know, we only have 30 minutes for this webinar. But after the webinar, I will email all of the participants the PowerPoint, and it does include the notes, and then some additional transition resources. Also, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box, and if I don't have time to answer them during the webinar, I will email you a response. This cartoon illustrates the importance of good transition planning. Larry learns the hard way that school and the real world don't always see success the same way. Larry's special education teacher. Congratulations, Larry! Again this year, you have achieved all your IEP goals. Thank you. Man at employment agency. I'm sorry, you're not prepared for a real job. Larry says, how can that be? I've achieved all of my IEP goals. So stop and think about that for a minute. And what does that say about what we're teaching our students? The purposes of IDEA include ensuring that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs. But there's a second part to that sometimes we forget. Prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So all the skills that we teach in school should prepare our students for life after high school. According to Oklahoma State policy, secondary transition services must be in effect at the beginning of the student's 9th grade year or by age 16, whichever occurs first. This means that the transition plan must be developed during the student's 8th grade year. An IEP team can decide to develop the transition plan earlier. It is best practice to begin transition planning as early as possible for students with disabilities to ensure successful post-school outcomes. Some of the reasons for starting the transition planning process earlier might include students who want to go to college need to sign up for OK Promise to make sure that they're taking the right courses, possibly researching resources for post-secondary education financial support, linking with other agencies that may be providing services, beginning to plan for residential care for some of our students, and many other reasons. You can refer to the OSDE website for additional guidance for our policies, our handbook, which has a section on transition, and then also the process guide. In addition, we do have a transition handbook that's located on our website as well. The Indicator 13 checklist is the secondary transition indicator. It is the percent of youth with IEPs ages 16 and above that have a compliant IEP that includes a transition plan with the required components. The Indicator 13 checklist was developed to help ensure that states are meeting the secondary transition requirements under IDEA. OSDE is required to report this data to the Office of Special Education Programs. So when we switched over to OK Ed Plan a few years back, that checklist seemed to have gone away, but actually it didn't go away. The components are built into Ed Plan as rules of completion. The checklist is still available. It's posted in OK Ed Plan under the State tab, and it's also available on the OSDE website on the transition page. So what I would recommend is that you, if you're new to special education or you're new to transition planning, that you print out a copy and you use that as you're developing your transition plans with your students and families, so that you're just, you're making sure that all of those necessary components are in there. It's not, you don't have to print it and include it for every IEP because, like I said, the components are built into OK Ed Plan, but it just might be good to have that visual as you're developing those goals and other requirements that you have that to reference. Okay, so the Indicator 13 checklist has several questions. And number one, are there appropriate measurable post-secondary goals in the areas of training, education, employment, and where appropriate, independent living skills? 2, are the post-secondary goals updated annually? 3, is there evidence that the measurable post-secondary goals were based on age-appropriate transition assessments? 4, are there transition services in the IEP that will reasonably enable the student to meet his or her post-secondary goals? 5, do the transition services include courses of study that will reasonably enable the student to meet his or her post-secondary goals? 6, are there annual IEP goals related to the student's transition services needs? 7, is there evidence that the student was invited to the IEP team meeting where transition services were discussed? 8, if appropriate, is there evidence that a representative of any participating agency was invited to the IEP team meeting with the prior consent of the parent or the student who has reached the age of majority? So for the rest of this webinar, we are going to look at each of these required components in more detail. So again, IEP teams must invite the student to the IEP team meeting. If for any reason the student cannot attend, we need to make sure that the student's preferences and interests have been considered. Also, invite a representative of any participating agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services with the prior consent of the parent or the student who has reached the age of majority. Transition assessment. So there are many transition assessments that you can use with your students. Many of them are free. As part of the materials that I will email out to you, I will send you a list of some transition assessments that, if you're new to transition, you may not be familiar with. Feel free to ask me questions about any of those. Transition assessment is an ongoing process of collecting data on individuals' strengths, so what they're good at doing, preferences, how they learn best and what they choose, interest, what they like to do, and needs. And these are going to be the skills that they still need to be taught, and these are going to become the annual transition goals, and we'll talk more about that. Transition assessment results provide an indication of students' progress toward reaching their post-secondary goals. All students must be assessed in the areas of education, training, and employment. Independent living and community participation are required for students who participate in the alternate assessment, or the OAP. So that's for our most significant students that participate in that. It is best practice to assess all of your students in all 4 areas. If you've worked with teenagers for any time, you found out pretty quickly, or if you have kids of your own, most of our kiddos have needs in the area of independent living that need to be addressed. So it is best practice to assess your students in all 4 areas and then develop goals based on those needs. Okay, post-secondary goals. Post means after. So that means that post-secondary goals occur after high school, not during high school, okay? After high school, and they must be updated annually. All students must have post-secondary goals in the areas of education, training, and employment. In addition to that, those students who are participating in the alternate assessment must have goals in all 4 areas. The IEP team may also address independent living and community participation, and in IDEA it says if determined appropriate, or if appropriate. So how we interpret that is, if you have identified needs from the assessments, then it would be appropriate to develop goals in those areas. So again, best practice is to address all 4 areas for all students. Post-secondary goals must be measurable. They're measurable if they can answer the following questions, and these are written in first person just to emphasize that students should have input and be involved in the development of their post-secondary goals. Where will I learn after high school? Where will I work after high school? Where will I live after high school? How will I participate in the community after high school? Next, we are going to talk about annual transition goals. So there can be a little confusion between post-secondary goals and annual transition goals. So let's compare them and hopefully help with some of that, to avoid some of that confusion or clear up. So post-secondary goals, these are going to be based upon student strengths, interests, and preferences that have been identified through the use of those age-appropriate transition assessments. Once again, post-secondary goals occur after high school. Annual transition goals are based on needs that have been identified through transition assessments. Annual transition goals address what skills the student will learn this year to demonstrate movement toward reaching each post-secondary goal. So you have a post-secondary goal in the area of education and training, and then you have an annual transition goal in education training that's going to help assist that individual in reaching the post-secondary goal for education training. So everything should align. Neither the post-secondary goal nor the annual goal are mere statements of passing a class with a certain grade. Also, just saying that, Johnny's going to complete the requirements for a high school graduation. That's not a post-secondary goal. It doesn't occur after high school. It's not a good annual transition goal because all students are trying to get their course requirements for graduation, and it's not a SMART goal. Okay? So hopefully that helps clear up a little bit of the difference between post-secondary goal and an annual goal. So let's talk some more about annual transition goals. So using the results from assessments, students and IEP teams can answer these questions to assist them in developing annual transition goals. What skills do I need to learn this year to go to school where I want? What skills do I need to learn this year to work where I want? What skills do I need to learn to live where I want? And what skills do I need to learn this year to participate in my community? All students must have annual goals in the areas of education, training, and employment, and may also have annual goals in independent living and community participation. And remember, each one of these aligns with those post-secondary goals in those same areas. Students with significant support needs who participate in the alternate assessment must have annual goals in independent living and community participation. They also need short-term objectives and benchmarks. So those goals need to be broken up by short-term objectives and benchmarks if they participate in the alternate assessment. Annual transition goals need to be measurable, and to help make sure they're measurable, they need to be a SMART goal and include the following: the condition, the application of skills or knowledge, the behavior, which identifies the performance being monitored and describes the materials, environment necessary to complete the goal, and the criterion, how much, how often. Course of study. So the course of study should identify the specific courses that a student will take, whether special education or general education, that directly supports progress toward post-secondary and annual goals. When you are creating the course of study, you want to consider the post-secondary goals, the interests, strengths, and needs. And students, along with the support from their IEP teams, can answer these questions. What classes and activities do I need to prepare me to learn, work, and live where I want after leaving school? What extra activities do I need? So transition services are defined under IDEA. Based on the child's needs, taking into account the child's strengths, preferences, and interests, and they can include things like instruction, related services, community experiences, employment and other post-school adult living objectives, daily living skills, and provision of a functional vocational evaluation if appropriate. So the coordinated activities are the task for the student to complete that will assist them in learning the skills and knowledge associated with each annual transition goal. Consider all of the activities that the student might benefit from or participate in to achieve each annual goal. So in this PowerPoint that I will send you, there's a lot of things that are hyperlinked, and one of them is this coordinated activities document that lists many ideas for coordinated activities in the various areas. Just make sure that those coordinated activities are related to the annual transition goal. Coordinated activities can take place at school, home, or the community, and the people responsible might include the student, parent, or other family member, special education teacher, general education teacher, or other school staff, outside staff such as the VR counselor. One great way to get families involved is to discuss with parents what coordinated activities that they might be responsible for, such as driver's ed, visiting the disability support services at the local college, helping their son or daughter complete the FAFSA, or many others. I do want to, LEAs do have an obligation under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to provide transition services. So, you want to make sure that you're including some of those that the school is going to be responsible for. Don't make everything on the parents, but certainly work together and figure out who's going to do what to provide those transition services. Students entering 9th grade are automatically enrolled in the College Preparatory Work-Ready Curriculum track. To opt out of the College Preparatory Work-Ready Curriculum track, For the core curriculum, parents must complete a form provided by the school, and the form will be placed in the student's cumulative folder. All right, DRS. So we want to make sure that we're completing referral forms for our students to the Department of Rehabilitation Services around the age of 15 and a half, and make sure those get sent to the DRS offices. Depending on your counselor, some counselors come to the schools and pick those up, some want them mailed over. So just work with your counselor to figure out what process works best for you and your site. But we do want to make sure that those referrals are being sent over. That does require consent for release of confidential information. That must be signed by the parent or the student if they're 18 prior to sending, to referring students to Department of Rehabilitation Services. Also, parent consent must be completed to invite DRS or other outside agencies to participate in the IEP meeting. Really encourage your parents and students to complete the DRS application and work with your counselors to, find out about all the possible services that might be available through DRS. So just remember that referral is just the initial step. The parents and students must complete that application process. All right, transfer of rights. By age 17, students and parents must be informed about the age of majority and transfer of the parent's rights to the student upon the student turning 18 years of age. In the case of guardianship, you want to make sure that your parents, have information if they're planning on seeking guardianship, if they're planning to continue to make all or part of the decisions for their child. And you want to make sure you're having those conversations in plenty of time. There are different types of guardianship. It is a court process. There is a fee involved. So get that information out to your parents early. I will also include some guardianship resources in the materials that I send to you. Vocational education. So when we're looking at the students' post-secondary goals, the IEP team must consider and provide information regarding vocational education. This might include things like career technology programs, work-study programs, school-based training, community-based job experience, high school vocational education courses. Due to the fact that, depending on where you live, the options might be very unique to particular schools and districts. So just make sure you're aware of what's available in your district, in your area. If you're new to the area or you're new to teaching, reach out to your special education director. If your new special education director, reach out to your VR counselor, the career tech centers, and any other agencies that might be located in your area. If you need assistance with that, feel free to type a question in the chat box or send me an email, and I can connect you with some people that might be more familiar with some resources in your area. Okay. So the LEA's obligation to provide special education services ends when the student meets the LEA and state requirements that apply to all students for the receipt of a regular high school diploma, or during the school year when the child turns 22 and they can finish the year. Although this is considered a change of placement, a reevaluation is not required. However, prior to graduation and the discontinuation of special education services, the LEA must provide the parent and or the student, because most of our students will be 18 when they graduate, or with written notice that the LEA's obligation to provide special education services ends when the student obtains a regular high school diploma or reaches maximum age. The LEA must also complete a summary of performance, also known as SOP. This should include academic achievement and functional performance information, so information like recent evaluation data, grades, overall GPA, progress made toward reaching the post-secondary goals, and just as importantly, recommendations for assisting the student in meeting his or her post-secondary goals. So what activities, accommodations, assistive technology, and strategies that will enable the student to be successful. So many times when I read summary of performances, I see the evaluation data and the grades, the GPA, but I don't always see, the second part, the recommendations for assisting the student in meeting his or her post-secondary goals. And that's really a very important component of a summary of performance. So I would encourage you, you don't have to wait until May to start working on those. Get your students involved. They can help in the development of that, and you can work on it, throughout that last semester. Okay, we just have a few minutes, so I do want to show you where you can access some additional resources. We contracted with the OU Zero Center to provide some quality trainings in the area of secondary transition, and we have some more of those that they will be doing in the spring. We will have one on transition planning for students with mild moderate needs. That will be in, I think, Oklahoma City, and then one in Tulsa. And then we will have transition planning for individuals with more significant support needs. That will be in Oklahoma City. I don't have those dates yet, but we're working on it. So if you are not signed up for our listserv, please visit the Oklahoma State Department of Education Special Education Services website and sign up for the listserv. That way you'll make sure you're notified of any additional trainings that we have coming up. In addition, there are a number of resources located on the secondary transition page. Also, there you go to Special Education Services, and then you go to the secondary transition page. So you can find some more resources there. Some additional resources. In OK Ed Plan, we've been trying to post some more resources there because, special education teachers are in it almost every day or daily. So we've been trying to put some things there. We have a secondary transition module in Pepper. It covers all of the Indicator 13 components that we went over today in 30 minutes, but it's in much greater detail, and you can work at your own pace. There are examples in that module, so if you haven't checked that out, you might want to check that out. And then we've also posted some transition PowerPoints in the Documents section in OK Ed Plan under the Special Education and State tabs. There are sample transition plans for a student with mild moderate needs, and also one for a student with severe profound needs. We also posted, if you were not able to attend the Oklahoma Transition Institute that was held in October, we posted all of the materials on that. They are also located on the OU Zero Center website. We went ahead and put them in OK Ed Plan, and you can look at those, and there's a variety of transition topics that might be useful to you. All right, so we're going to wrap it up. Think about how this information will help you to develop better secondary transition plans, and what questions do you still have about secondary transition planning. Post your comments and questions in the chat box, and I will get back to you. And again, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.